Over on Jaguar Gatorade, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about a 1989 controversy between the Ivy League and ESPN, and how ESPN wanted the Ivy League to get more TV exposure, but did it by insulting the Ivy League in the process. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And now, on with our feature presentation. When you think of the most prestigious award that a player can win solely from an on-the-field perspective, it has to be the MVP. To win the most valuable player means that of the thousands of players in the National Football League, you were the one that meant the most to their respective team. It's a huge accomplishment that etches your name in NFL history forever. And when you think of everyone to win MVP, you think of their body of work over the course of the entire season. There might be a defining play in there that you associate their season with, but for the most part, if you remove a play that they had from that season, it doesn't change their MVP candidacy. Remove the best run from Adrian Peterson's season in 2012, and he's still winning the MVP. Remove the best pass from Peyton Manning's season in 2013, and he's still winning the MVP. One play, especially one that, in the grand scheme of things, meant absolutely nothing and did not impact your record or whether you won or lost the game, is not changing the vote for MVP. That is, except for 1982. Because the man you're looking at right now is the man that would eventually go on and win the MVP for that season, none other than Washington kicker Mark Moseley. And what you might not realize about the incredible season that Moseley had is that he was, in all likelihood, one kick away from not winning MVP. There was one kick that he had that did not count, that had it have counted, probably would have single-handedly derailed his MVP chances. It's a kick that didn't happen. It's a play that had no impact on the outcome of the game. And it's a play that has been erased from the record books. But 40 years later, considering the circumstances and how much it changed NFL history, it might be one of the most important kicks and penalties in the history of the NFL, simply because of how much legacies were impacted by it. And this is the story behind the forgotten kick that changed the 1982 NFL season. Before I talk about the actual kick in question, we need some context to understand how Mark Moseley's season was going, as well as how the actual MVP race was looking. And before I talk about Moseley, we need to talk about this guy right here. Because this is Dan Fouts, and he is one of the best quarterbacks to ever play in the NFL. If you ask people to name the greatest quarterback in NFL history in the post-merger era to never make it to the Super Bowl, in all likelihood, the name you'll hear pop up is either Warren Moon or San Diego Chargers quarterback Dan Fouts. And in 1982, he was in the midst of his prime, and might have been the best quarterback in all of football. The 1982 season was the fourth consecutive season that Fouts led the NFL in passing yards, making him the first and, to date, the only quarterback in NFL history to ever lead the league in passing yards 4 times in a row. And 1982 might have been his best year yet. He was named a first-team All-Pro by the Associated Press and a Pro Bowler, and was named the AP Offensive Player of the Year with over 50% of the vote, winning this award for the first time in his career. And Fouts finished that 1982 season with 2,883 passing yards and 17 touchdowns, with both totals leading the league. Remember, this was a strike-shortened season, where only 9 games were played, and you can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But Fouts was averaging over 320 passing yards per game, which was a career high, and at the time, was the highest total in NFL history. If there was a full 16-game season, and we extrapolated his numbers over the course of that season, he would have had 5,125 yards, which would have smashed the NFL record, and would have made him the first quarterback in NFL history to throw for 5,000 yards. And for some more perspective on how great 320 passing yards per game is, at the time, there had only been one other instance of a quarterback throwing for an average of over 300 yards in a game over the course of a season, and that was in 1981. When a guy threw for 300.1 yards per game. As you might have been able to guess, that was Dan Fouts. Even in the record books today, where the game is so pass-heavy, Fouts' 320.3 yards per game in 1982 ranks 10th all-time, and if it was placed in the 2020s, would have been the highest total of the decade so far. In short, Fouts was really good, and he was having an unbelievable 1982 season. Fouts had never won the MVP before, and especially with the Chargers making the playoffs at 6-3, with the best offense in the NFL, this was looking like the year that Fouts would win it. Alas, he did not, because they gave the award to this man right here, a kicker from Washington by the name of Mark Moseley. Oddly enough, this is not the first time I've done a video on the career of Moseley, as if you want to learn more about the crazy ending to his career, where he went from the broadcast booth to hitting the game-winning field goal in the span of a week, click the card in the upper right corner. When people ask what the most controversial MVP vote of all time is, odds are they'll say it's either the 1987 season, where Jerry Rice, with a record 22 receiving touchdowns, did not win the MVP, as it went to John Elway, or they'll say it's this 1982 season, when a kicker won it over one of the greatest seasons by any quarterback in NFL history at the time. It will very likely be the first and only time in history that a kicker wins the MVP. A lot of people speculated that this was a protest vote due to the strike. Now, none of this is to take anything away from Moseley, because he was a fantastic kicker. Dating back to the end of 1981, he hit 21 consecutive field goals, which was an NFL record at the time. He made multiple game-winning and game-tying field goals in the fourth quarter or overtime of the 1982 season, constantly coming up clutch when Washington needed him to. With no time left in the fourth quarter of the season opener against the Philadelphia Eagles, and down by 3 points, Moseley lined up for a 48-yard field goal to tie the game and send it into overtime. He drilled it. Then, he lined up for a 26-yard field goal to win the game in overtime, and he made the kick, helping his team win 37-34. And in their 7th game, with 9 seconds left on the clock at the time of the snap, and Washington trailing 14-12 against the New York Giants, Moseley lined up for a 42-yard field goal to win it. He got that one. Over the course of the season, Moseley went 20 for 21, hitting 95.2% of his kicks. Not only was that the top total in the NFL, but at the time, it was the top total in NFL history. Entering 1982, only one kicker, Jan Stenerud in 1981 with the Green Bay Packers, ever had a season hitting at least 88% of his kicks. And here was Moseley, sitting at 95.2%, almost 4 percentage points above Stenerud for the record in accuracy. While Fouts was having arguably the greatest season by any quarterback ever, Moseley was having arguably the greatest season by any kicker ever. But here's the forgotten part about the Moseley story. He was moments away from not being 20 for 21. He was moments away from not setting the accuracy record. And he was moments away from not winning the MVP because of it. Because in their 6th game that season, a contest at Busch Stadium against the St. Louis Cardinals, he missed a kick that never counted. That would have changed everything if it did. Let's set the scene for this game in this moment. It's December 12, 1982, and it's Washington at St. Louis, with Washington sitting at 4-1 and St. Louis sitting at 3-2. Neither team is able to score on their first drive of the game. Washington goes 3-and-out after opting to punt on 4th and a foot, and St. Louis walks away empty-handed after they try for a 27-yard field goal from kicker Neil O'Donohue, but he misses badly to the right. But whereas the first drive of the game for Washington wasn't an ideal start by any means, drive number 2 is looking a little bit better. A 3rd down screen pass from Joe Theismann to Joe Washington picks up 15 yards and gives Washington their first down of the game. Faced with another 3rd down situation a few plays later, Theismann completes a pass over the middle to his tight end, Don Warren, picking up another 1st down. And a few plays later, Joe Washington picks up another 1st down for Washington, as he catches the pass and gets tackled late out of bounds, getting Washington into field goal range. Eventually, the drive stalls, and it's time for Moseley to step onto the field and try a 37-yard field goal to open up the scoring and give Washington the lead. And before I talk about the kick that Moseley was about to attempt, a quick note about the stadium that this game was being played at, Busch Stadium. Because even though this game was taking place in September, well past baseball season, meaning that you didn't see any dirt on the field, any of the traditional markings and things you'd see for a baseball game, and anything that made the stadium look like it did in September, the surface at Busch Stadium was notoriously bad. It was one of the worst in the league. Even if you couldn't see the pitcher's mound during football season, you still knew where the pitcher's mound was. You could still see cracks in the surface. That is not an ideal environment for any player to thrive in and succeed in, but especially for a kicker, that's the last thing you want to be worrying about. With all that being said, Moseley lines up for the 37-yard kick to give Washington a 3-0 lead. And for the first time all season, the kick is no good. His consecutive field goals made streak which at this point was 14, is over. His accuracy being at 100% is over. For the first time all season, he missed. And Moseley was devastated about this, and after the game, was replaying that kick in his head. As Moseley said, "I slipped. My plant foot doesn't have AstroTurf cleats. The ball was near the pitcher's mound, and I was about 6 inches away from a crack. I was concerned, because I knew we were in a battle." Regardless, the perfect season was ruined. Except, there was a flag on the play. Because as it turns out, a defender on St. Louis barely lined up offside. I couldn't tell you who that player was. CBS decided not to show a replay of the kick at all, so the only footage of the kick was the original footage where he missed. Superb job there. All we know is that there were boos from the fans and protests from the players, so it was awfully close. It's not as though a defender was 5 yards offside to the point where it had any impact on Moseley's kicking ability. However, because a player was offside, Moseley got a second chance at redemption, although this time it would be from 5 yards closer, as this kick wouldn't be by a crack or the pitcher's mound, and instead would be a 32-yard field goal. And on this one, there was no doubt whatsoever. Moseley drilled it, Washington took a 3-0 lead, Moseley's consecutive field goal streak was at 15, and Moseley was still at 100% on the season. Now you might be asking yourself why this play even matters. It didn't have any impact on the game. Washington won it 12-7. So even if you take that offside penalty out of the equation, you give Moseley a miss for that, and he never gets a second try, if everything stays the same, Washington still wins it. Plus, because this was so early in the game, as it was the first quarter, there are so many hypotheticals that to speculate on how this would have impacted the remaining 50 or so minutes of the contest is silly. But one thing you can't deny is that if St. Louis never lined up offside, then the kick would have been a miss instead of a make. And when you look at it from an individual and a statistical standpoint, this offside penalty might have been one of the most important offside penalties of all time that isn't talked about. Because this penalty changed the entire 1982 season, the MVP race, and NFL history. If St. Louis never lined up offside, then Moseley misses this kick. This means that Moseley finishes the season 19 for 21 instead of 20 for 21. And that is a big difference. Going 20 for 21 means you hit 95.2% of your field goals, and had at that point the greatest statistical season in NFL history by a kicker. Going 19 for 21 means you hit 90.4% of your field goals. That's a difference of 5 percentage points. And don't get me wrong, 90.4% of your kicks is still a fantastic season. The only difference? Not only would that not have been the NFL record for accuracy, which was part of the reason why Moseley won MVP in the first place, but it wouldn't have even been the most accurate percentage of the 1982 season. Because in 1982, Lions kicker Eddie Murray hit on 91.7% of his kicks, tying Jan Stenerud from 1981 for the NFL record. And no, Murray never had a shot at winning MVP. The Lions were below 500, and Murray was 11 for 12. So even though he qualified, he didn't exactly have the largest sample size in the world. Do the voters give the MVP to a kicker in Mark Moseley, who wasn't even the most accurate kicker in the league? Probably not. And if St. Louis never lined up offside, it means that Moseley's streak, where he broke Garo Yepremian's 20-kick record for most consecutive field goals made, never happens, or even comes close to happening, as it stalls at 14. The two biggest reasons why Moseley won MVP, and the two biggest arguments in his favor, were that he set the record for the most consecutive field goals made, and set the record for the highest accuracy in a single season. If St. Louis never lines up offside, or if the referee never made a controversial call, then he has none of those arguments. That kick that didn't count? It might have legitimately changed the entire MVP race for the 1982 season. If that kick counted, then Dan Fouts is your likely winner of the MVP. I'm not sure how many people remember this play even happening, as it was 40 years ago and never counted, and didn't impact the game. But it deserves to be remembered today because of how much the history of the NFL changed because of it, even if it meant nothing from an actual game standpoint. It's not often that one negated play, especially in the first quarter, makes the difference over the course of an entire season in terms of the MVP race. But in 1982, with Mark Moseley's missed kick that didn't happen, that's exactly what happened. Because in the strike-shortened 1982 season, when it came to awards, one offside penalty changed history forever. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.